8:13. Let's talk to Harold the H. P. Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Yes.
He's going to talk about the story of how Ipswich convict Thomas Tasker, there'll be a few of them over at the Ipswich races today, got his nickname.
Oh.
Harold?
Oh, yes. Good morning, Dummy. I was just contemplating the races as I look running down the form guide. There's a big race happening in Ipswich.
Massive, and of course they'll turn up their dress so elegantly and go away with broken stilettos and things hanging out, and bending over and showing their bottoms.
Yeah, but you need those stilettos. You need those stilettos for the extra elevation.
I wished I could. Wish blokes did have stilettos, and I would be taller. But anyhow, let's get on with this bloke, Thomas. Who was Thomas Tasker?
Thomas Tasker, look, and it's his nickname from like 175 to 176 years ago, but it is incredibly rare that the beginning of a nickname is actually documented and recorded in history. So this was quite a find, Danny.
What was his nickname? Now, Donkey?
Oh, I can't tell you yet. That's what we get to the end. We'll cover your nicknames later. But in 1839... Thomas Tasker was convicted at Warwick in Coventry, England, of an unrecorded charge and sentenced to 10 years transportation to the colonies. That's here. He set foot ashore in Sydney the following year, having sailed here aboard the square-rigged ship Woodbridge under the command of Captain William Dobson. Now, in the Woodbridge's next voyage here, the same Captain Dobson and the ship's surgeon would be rumoured to have committed homicide. So we just don't know how comfortable Thomas Tasker's voyage out here was. But by 1847, Tasker was in and around Ipswich, here in the Moreton Bay district, which back then was still part of New South Wales. Now, that's when he obtained his ticket of leave. Now, this was a sort of convict parole that meant Tasker had some freedoms but still had to remain in the district and report regularly. Tasker was also supposed to behave, but he didn't. Well, I guess he hung around with bad company, and in 1850 is when he earned his nickname. Now, in May 1850, a case went to court about stolen goods in Ipswich.
Swollen goods?
A man named William Butler from the descriptively named Cockfighters Creek down in the Hunter region, he was charged with stealing in Ipswich a box of tools.
Right.
But Butler claimed he bought the tools from the convict Tasker, who, of course, he denied everything.
Wow.
And so on the non-evidence of Tasker, the case was so clearly proven that the jury, without even retiring, returned a verdict of guilty. Then just a couple of months later, in July 1850, things livened up even more, and Tasker was again back in court. Tasker's mate, who was called Arnold, he'd spent too long in the pub when he sold his filly, his horse, at the very cheap price of 5 shillings to an alluring female called Deborah Grocott, alias Howe or alias Howard. Now, she was probably the same person who a couple of years later was found kneeling and screeching in the middle of the street and was locked up for being of unsound mind.
Wow.
In any case, on the morning after selling the horse, Arnold, after having slept it off, had forgotten about the sale and just jumped on his horse to ride off. An almighty fight ensued, and Tasker watched the whole thing. The combatants were, of course, Arnold and the fair damsel Grocott. And, of course, they ended up in court.
Wow.
Now, meanwhile, it transpired that on the night of the horse transaction, Tasker had also gone off with another one of his mates called Henry Martin. Now, Martin snuck off and quietly stole some women's clothing.
Oh, the bludger.
Yeah, he put them on and went on a moonlight flit. Now, this is the same Martin who later was the victim of stolen cheques, but wasn't allowed to give evidence in his own case because he was considered, not of sound mind. Now, the Ipswich magistrate for this whole sordid affair was Dr. William Dorsey. Now, you remember him because it was only 2 months after this case that Dr. Dorsey and his stolen ducks would be responsible for that very public wrestle of 4 people, including 2 constables, which was the biggest stack in Ipswich history. Now, anyway, Tasker gave evidence for his two mates in the horse transaction and the moonlight transvestite cases, Dr. Dorsey thought the whole thing was so ridiculous that he refused to swear in a jury. He instead dismissed both cases with a salutary caution against inebriety, that's drunkenness,
Right.
and bad company.
Right.
And so from all this, our Thomas Tasker was given a nickname that stuck with him for life.
And?
And he was referred to every single time in the paper from then on by this nickname.
What?
And he was commonly referred to as Gooseberry. Now, the nickname Gooseberry was given to someone who was an unwelcome presence or a third wheel in a social situation.
Oh.
And for Ipswich's Gooseberry, this was definitely the case. Now, Gooseberry was unwanted when when it was claimed he'd sold stolen goods, and he had actually had his mate summarily convicted. Gooseberry was again of no use when a mate inadvertently sold a horse at a knockdown price.
All right.
And again, he was no help when a mate went for a midnight run in women's clothing. But despite all of that, Danny, you've got to love characters like the convict Gooseberry. In Ipswich's colourful history, it's just never ending, these people.
Never ending, and to be dropped on the prettiest island in the world from England, you'd be happy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's right. And to get a nickname like Gooseberry, like there's a lot of worse ones than that. But he was just forevermore, after those cases, he was Gooseberry in the papers.
Great yarn.
Good on him.
Another great Ipswich yarn. Ipswich is just, it's got yarns coming out of yarns, hiding behind trees. There's yarns everywhere. So how can we listen and read this yarn and other yarns that you've been doing for me for numerous years?
Yeah, look, I think there's actually 252 stories for you, Danny. We're into our 6th year telling these stories.
Oh.
So you can go online to my website, historyouthere.com.
Historyouthere.com, and they call him Harold the H. Cock-a-doodle-doo. He's famous around the traps. They love him in Ipswich. The mayor loves him, and you might see him today down at the Ipswich Cup shaking hands with Paul Pasali. Yes.